Hey guys, and welcome back to the Yes Means Yes podcast. This week we have on two guests, Isabelle Frye and Krystal Lynch, with the Domestic Violence Center located here in Auburn, Alabama. And my name is Faith Nomchef. I'm a victim advocate outreach coordinator with Rape Counselors. I'm going to let my coworker introduce herself real quick.
Hey, I'm Amanda Carpenter, and I'm also with RCEA, and I am the victim advocate / outreach specialist.
So I'm going to go ahead and let Isabelle and Krystal kind of talk about their roles and what they do at the Domestic Violence Center.
Hi, I'm Isabelle Frye. I am now the program supervisor for the Domestic Violence Intervention Center. Pretty much I oversee outreach and things that, the day-to-day business. I used to be, or still oversee the legal and sale program for all of our 6 counties, which is Lee, Macon, Russell, Chambers, Tallapoosa, Randolph. And this is actually Krystal Lynch. I'll take it over.
I am Krystal Lynch, and I work for the Domestic Violence Intervention Center. I am a sales specialist, and SALES stands for Special Assessment Intervention Liaison, and I'm also their legal advocate. The SALE program actually specializes in helping women who have children and are fleeing domestic violence and are trying to do it on their own and become self-sufficient. There's a lot of resources that we help them with, and one thing that they have to do to qualify for the program is you have to have children and you have to be a domestic violence victim. And so we help with all of those things, such as housing and a lot of other childcare resources, counseling. Being a legal advocate for the Domestic Violence Intervention Center just means that you advocate for women who have been in domestic violence situations. We help them file protection orders, which I'm sure that we will get into all of that later on in the podcast. And we go to court with them. We speak to the judges if we have to. We don't testify, but we advocate in whatever way that we can.
Perfect. All right. Thank you guys so much. So we're going to kind of really just break it down to the basics just for anyone who might be listening who's not really familiar. So what is domestic violence? What is the definition of that? And I know we kind of refer to it as DV too. So DV is domestic violence, but I'll let y'all kind of define that.
So I feel it's any act, and it's just kind of interesting that, we always hear about the physical or sexual act and it being abuse, but there's a psychological and a economical part of this as well. And I feel that especially during these times of, with COVID and things like that have come up in our world lately, you're starting to see those other parts of it. And it's not just the physical and sexual part anymore. So I feel like those are the key components when it comes to domestic violence. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so how do y'all see domestic violence and sexual assault intersect with one another? Is that something you see a lot when you have victims? Well, actually, what do y'all call them victims? Do you call them survivors? Do you call them consumers? Do you call them clients? How do you address them when they come into the shelter?
We address them as survivors and clients. When we talk about them with, to each other, they're referred to as clients. But, they've survived that act or that abuse already. So we're transitioning. And I feel like that just also empowers that woman as well, that they're transitioning to that next phase of life. They're no longer a victim.
Absolutely. That's exactly what we do at RCEA as well. So do y'all see domestic violence and sexual assault intersect a lot when you have survivors come in and talk with you guys and stay at the shelter with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that a lot of times is a big part of a lot of the stories. And I think it goes hand in hand with that control and the abuse. And I think that they definitely intersect a lot more than victims or survivors. Sorry, I call them victims. Talk about. And then as you get to know them and you do assessments, you start to see that they don't even realize that there's sexual assault and sexual abuse. And you get to kind of dissect that intake and talk to them. And then they realize, like Isabelle was saying earlier, that it's not just the sexual and the physical, but it's so much more. It's financially, it's sexually. I think all of that comes out the more that we are teaching them and talking to them about the actual domestic violence acts.
And on that note, especially when we're dealing with women who are actually married or they've been in a long-term relationship with the abuser, they no longer see that. Well, I don't really have the option to say no. Like it's almost my duty. I feel like we counter that a lot. And it's like, no, no, no. You need to realize that you still say no, and it means no, no. That just because you're married does not allow you to it doesn't mean that you have to oblige with that. Absolutely not. And so I think, like Crystal was saying, once we get into that assessment, that needing and greeting, we're learning all the details. It's like, wait a minute, you said no. Let's go back. Let's go back and look at all these incidents.
Yeah. That's definitely something that we hear a lot, I would say, is that marital rape can't happen. But yeah, so it's good that y'all brought that point up. I'm sorry, Crystal, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I think rape is something that, you're dealing with so much hurt and so much pain and the physical, psychological, the mental abuse that rape is something that's very hard to talk about and even acknowledge for survivors because it holds such shame for them. And once you can get them to a place where they acknowledge the rape, it's almost like you kind of can see freedom. Like it's something that they're so ashamed of, like there's so many people that go through the physical and the mental and the psychological, but when you start talking about the rape, you can kind of just see that it's like this relief, like, okay, me too, like, yes, I definitely agree with this. And so I think that was just a very good question because we don't ever really get to talk about that a lot. We know that it's there and we encourage that if that aspect of the abuse is there for us to be able to talk about it. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
So, Amanda, did you have anything? Okay, perfect. Sorry, you just looked like that. So do you guys consider domestic violence a community issue?
That's a big question. I think so. I'm not originally from Alabama, neither is Crystal. So it's very interesting when you start the demographics and you start looking at things that way. And especially coming in Alabama, especially some of these rural counties that we do work for or work with, it's still very taboo. Just how sexual assault is still very taboo. You have some people like, Crystal and I, we used to tag team a lot when we would do outreach just to speak to people, and it's like, that doesn't happen here. So it's just that mindset, and I feel just educating, again, it goes back to education. If you can educate people, it makes them more aware and what to look for. So I think it's just more, so is it a community issue? I think that's where outreach comes in hand and having more, fundraisers or functions out in the community to spread that word and be like, this is what it is. And, or some people just have no idea, like, this has been happening to me for 25 years and without them realizing that's not a life, so we see that and hear that quite a bit, I feel like. So again, I always lean back to, we need to educate our communities about what DV is, what sexual assault is, and what's right and what's wrong. I just feel like people tend to get lost in that gray area.
I think it's when I started this job, our executive director at the time had us do something that was a report that we had to report every year, and I've done it ever since I've been here. But our job was to call every single county that we were serving at the time and get the DV number of calls that they have received that year. And so this is before I started doing outreach and before I even knew what county. Well, I had all 6 at some point. And so, you call these police departments and you speak to all these people and you're like, hey, I'm calling to find out what the number of domestic violence calls were for September 2018 to October 2019, whatever the numbers are. And in some of these very small counties, let's say Chambers, Macon, in 1 year, they've had 575 domestic violence calls, and you're kind of like, wow, it's so eye-opening. And then you start the aspect of outreach, right? Where you go and you're talking to all these people and you're like, hey, we're from the Domestic Violence Intervention Center and we just want to bring awareness. And, you take two people like me and Isabelle, we're very passionate. We work in the field. We see it every day. We're on the phone with, anybody that needs any kind of assistance. And you have these people that look you in the eyes and say, oh, yeah, well, thank God drug abuse is the biggest issue in our community, or thank God this is the biggest issue in our community, that will not acknowledge it. So to answer your question, do I think it's a community issue? Absolutely. Do I think that it's, the entire community in East Alabama? No, I think that we have worked really hard to bring awareness, and I think that we have worked really hard to make sure that people even really understand. At first, I would just be like, okay, wow, and I would kind of walk out and just be so taken like back and be like, wow, these people are kind of in denial. And now that I've developed a new passion for it, I kind of don't leave until they understand that, yes, drug abuse and drug addiction is definitely an issue, but domestic violence is definitely an issue in the community. And a lot of times it goes hand in hand. And so, not in an ugly way, but just a very passionate way, because I want women, men, anybody to know that there is a way out, and that there could be a community that can rally and help and use these resources. A lot of times people don't even know that we're here. And I can't remember the exact number, but this agency has been here for over 30 years. And, it's amazing that till this day, people will not acknowledge. Now, some people are open in the community, and I have had some great conversations. I have gotten calls from people that I thought they didn't believe in anything I just said. Like, we are seeing a change within our 6 counties that we serve, because we have been out in the field and we have pleaded with these people to acknowledge that there is domestic violence.
Like that. I always say that we have to talk about the things that people don't want to talk about. Like, it's our job to talk about those things. Yeah. Thank you.
And we get a lot of that too. Just like I had said earlier in a podcast, when I did my internship, I did East Alabama Mental Health. And, when I would go out in the community and talk about, drugs and alcohol, people would sit there and they would listen, or they would come to your table. But when I started working at Rape Counselors, I would go out there and put a table out there right beside East Alabama Mental Health, and you would literally see them turn their heads so they wouldn't have to make eye contact with you.
Right.
So when I first started at Rape Counselors, it was very it was hard, because you're so used to people coming up to you and wanting to talk to you, and they want your little goodies on your table. But when it has rape on it, they turn their head. And so, of course, being an advocate, I can, like, hey, try to bring them to the table, but it's almost like they're even embarrassed to be seen at your table.
Absolutely.
So I'm sure you guys, y'all see that as well. And it does make your job harder, because you do have a hard time reaching people, even though you're sitting in the middle of a field with a lot of other people, but they seem to be going to the other tables instead of yours, because they just don't want to be associated with it, because there is such a stigma with sexual assault and domestic violence. So that's why it's so important, and we're gracious for you guys, for us to be able to work together and help those in the community that may come to us but don't necessarily want to come to domestic violence, or vice versa. So So speaking of that, so let's talk a little bit about your emergency services. So like, how does that exactly work?
So we have a 24-hour crisis line, and it's available even right now during all of this, and it has not stopped. You can always call that hotline number, and they're going to do a real quick assessment, see what you're looking for. Obviously we have a safe house, and we actually offer a number of resources, especially for outreach. We offer, like Krystal mentioned earlier, counseling. We have a child advocate. We have a case manager. We have actually two sale and legal advocates. We have a shelter coordinator. We have all of these resources, and sometimes I feel that people don't realize we're like an open. The moment that you speak to one of us, we just open you up to hundreds of resources within the community, and but obviously, I mean, even sometimes some women haven't, they're thinking about leaving. They haven't really decided that yet. And that's when we can be like, hey, we'll go ahead and meet with you. Let's come up with a safety plan. Because in that moment, and I'm speaking really actually as a survivor from domestic violence, in that moment, you're not thinking, I need to grab my driver's license. I need to grab my social security card. Sometimes you're just like, I just need the clothes that's on my back and let's go because this is my moment to flee. And so, when we talk to women like that, I feel like we're really giving it our all because I know me personally, I also see it as, I feel like that's a younger me, and I'm like, I need to get you that help that I couldn't figure out how to get, or it wasn't available at that time, to be very honest. So, I think we take it all to heart. I've seen all of us at one time or another have come down because there's an emergency, and it doesn't matter the time, I know our personal lives might not like that too much, but that's our passion. It's like, no, we're here to see you succeed. We're here to see you turn that page and let's start a whole new chapter. And so us offering so many services, I just feel like a lot of people don't utilize them correctly. Or maybe there's also some shame, like we were talking about, with coming to the realization that we're a victim. I know it was very hard for me to swallow that at one time. I was like, are you kidding me? Me? No way. I'm not a victim. Like, I can overcome anybody, and that's not true. That's not true. We all need help. And sometimes I feel like the hardest thing to swallow.
So my other question is, so just say someone gets in touch with you guys. Do you guys give them your address and they come to you, or do they go through the police? Like, how do they find you guys?
Well, once they call the hotline, we, as of right now, obviously because of COVID-19, are only doing over the phone appointments unless we can meet them at DHR. But usually, yes, we don't necessarily give them an address because we don't have, I mean, we have a physical address, but we don't give it out. We kind of just assess the situation, and if they qualify for sale and or legal, we go to a DHR office because that's the offices that we work out of. Unless they absolutely can't meet, of course they can come and meet in our room. If they're doing outreach, most of the time they come to our administrative office and we meet with them.
But if somebody is seeking shelter, they call the 24-hour hotline. We go through an assessment. Again, Krystal's right. With the COVID questions, there's obviously a couple more questions that we're taking precautions all the way around for the people who are there, residents, or even ourselves. And we have is what's considered a safe spot. I get information about what time are you going to be there. We have somebody on call constantly that can go and meet that family or that person and bring them to our safe house. But just to protect everybody in around the area, or including ourselves and who's here, that's how we handle that privacy and that confidentiality. Is we'll say, hey, we're going to meet you here. And also, you also want to be aware. Self-aware is just sometimes I've learned that being out more in the public or doing more social speaking or social events, people tend to start recognizing you with what agency, and you just never want somebody to follow you. And how do you know you're not taking, what I mean? It's just, you have to be self-aware and conscious of that at all times.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit, y'all going over the counties and stuff, but what populations exactly do you serve at DPIC? Like, who is eligible for your services?
Everybody.
Everyone. Say something. I don't know how you edit this whole thing, but I totally said women with children prior to coming here. I worked for a women and children's facility, so I'm so used to saying women and children because obviously
We got you. Yeah.
women. So if I could redo that part, we serve everybody. I said women and children, but oops.
If you're cool, I'm just gonna leave like this part in because I mean this is just kind of like free flowing speech, like it's not like super formal. But so I actually did not know that. So if you were to have a male survivor of domestic violence, is this something? Could you offer them housing?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay. So it's like not in.
No, absolutely not. I mean, the only thing is that we deal with intimate partners. So because, and we'll get into that like with PFAs, like there's now a section on the PFA that you can put it on a family member. But in regards with us, we deal with intimate relationships, but it doesn't matter if you're the male and you're trying to escape, if you're the woman, if you're single, if you have children, whatever the case may be, we're here to help anybody.
Yeah, we've definitely have had male clients, and it's interesting, but it doesn't take our passion away, or it doesn't make a difference. Like, we still feel very much like our job is to advocate, and I think that sometimes just within the domestic violence circles, people have talked about how, oh, well, when y'all get a male client, is it weird? Is it different? Is it uncomfortable? No, because they need help just as much. I mean, we had a male client. We advocated for him. Like, I mean, we were so passionate about his situation. We wanted to see him like be set free, literally, from his abuser. And, but yeah, we serve all genders, races. I mean, disabled, pregnant. We will do an assessment with anybody.
So let me ask you guys. So we kind of touched on it earlier, but there are some red flags and warnings that people should look out for when they're talking to their friends and family, that are experiencing domestic violence. So, and I also have another question. So with domestic violence, do y'all still call it domestic violence, or do you interchange intimate partner violence? Like, do y'all?
I just always go back to domestic violence, because whether it's
Okay.
or not, at the basis of the foundation is domestic violence.
Okay.
But with red flags, it's very interesting. It's, I feel like sometimes we can kind of read into things too much, because even with each other, within ourselves, like, we know how to read, like, what's wrong today? Like, something's wrong. Like, I know that there's something, something's not right. And I think it just makes you a better observer. We all know, obviously, somebody has a black eye. It's something that we can see. But, when you start taking it, like, in this heat, Alabama is extremely hot. And if we started to notice people in nothing but long sleeves, that's me automatically. I'm like, are we hot? Are you cold? Are you not feeling well? Like, I'm starting to ask all of these questions because, a lot of times when you start grabbing, you just start leaving prints, and I also feel like, when the abuser is using your family against you or starts pulling you away from friends and family, like, you didn't make it to a function. Why weren't you there? Or, hey, I called you a couple of times to come out to the barbecue, you didn't make it. And especially knowing that person, that they're kind of that social butterfly and they're not making things anymore, making events, that's a huge red flag to all of us. And then, it's so, especially like right now with COVID-19 and everything, I feel a lot of people are gravitating more to, there's a lot of depression coming along with that, so they're gravitating towards a coping mechanism, and sometimes that's alcohol, but sometimes that's pills. If we're noticing that our loved one is sleeping longer than 8 hours, or they're taking, naps, 4-hour naps during the day, and you're not pregnant, then there's something else going on, you know? So I think it's just more being diligent and being, you know, self-aware and also just aware of everybody around you. And sometimes people just don't want to talk about it. And sometimes you need to be like, okay, pull that person aside. What's going on? You know, you're not the same person that you were 2 weeks ago. The only difference that I noticed is that now you're seeing this person, or maybe this person did. So it's just being aware of those kind of things.
I think,
No, go ahead. Go ahead with what you're saying, Krystal.
red flags. I think for me, it goes back to control. And so a very big red flag, and I can speak to this from experience, is just the control that comes with a domestic violence situation. You know, they start to try to control your appearance and, you know, try to control where you go. They limit your visitation. Like Isabelle was saying, you know, you start to feel isolated and secluded because, you know, you can't talk to that person because of whatever reasons. You can't have these friends because you've been honest with these friends about how abusive I was, and now they don't like you, and you don't want them to take you away from me. So, you know, you got to block them, you got to cut them off. Going through each other's phones, just all of that toxic behavior is part of the red flags. And it may not seem like anything because I know for me, like I can justify, you know, those things because you think like, oh, they're just worried or concerned or whatever. And at the end of the day, it's abuse.
Well, I think it's hard when you look at like all the media examples and they try to romanticize like possessiveness, and he's just trying so hard for her, or she's just like really loves him, she can't let it go. So I think that makes it like doubly difficult because people are seeing it over and over again in the media, and this is supposed to be romantic when really it's a toxic relationship, it's an abusive relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like you nailed it. I mean, you see so many posts or memes, you know, and it's just like, oh, that's so funny. Or I wish I had a boyfriend who was checking in on me all the time. No, no, no. That's borderline stalking at this point.
Yeah.
You know, they're just not aware of it. And it's just, it's so amazing how wrapped up we get in that. And it's almost just to just fit in that norm. You know, it's, yes, you said that perfectly.
Yeah. Very harmful for, sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, I think it's really harmful for the younger generations who are seeing it because they're on social media. They're the ones who are seeing this. They're the ones who haven't had experience with relationships. So if the only experience they're seeing is like movies or, like you said, these memes and stuff, that's how they're going to base how a relationship should be. So it's definitely important, I think, that like you guys said, like your outreach services and stuff. And we actually go into the schools and talk about safe dating and like sexual abuse, which is really good. And we've had, goodness, so many 16, 17-year-olds come up to us afterward and be like, I think I was in an abusive relationship and I had no clue.
Yeah. Wow.
Just like the education.
That's wonderful that you guys are doing that. Absolutely. You know, wow. Just, I mean, you just gave me an idea.
Yeah, not sure how that's going to look now with COVID in the fall, but we will see. But sorry, go ahead, Amanda. I was just talking about our safe dating curriculum we do.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, just you know how a lot of abusers like to make the person feel like it's their fault. Like, well, if you wouldn't have done that, then, you know, it wouldn't have been, I wouldn't have done that to you, or I wouldn't have said that to you. It's your fault. You made me do it, and it's because I love you so much. That was all I was going to say, but we'd already moved on.
No, that manipulation
We're good.
is key, absolutely. And I mean, it's, you hear it time and time. When you hear the stories so many times as we do, you know, well, he only had a drink that night, you know, and he had a bad day, or she got into an argument with her family and she had to take it out on me. It's just, it's a manipulation, and I mean, they learn it very, very well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, so this is a very loaded question. Do you guys think that the legal system fails survivors? And so how, I know this is a tough one.
That is a tough question. I think there's several variables to actually consider when you ask that type of question. You know, both being legal advocates, because I still do that every now and then, and you go to court and you see the punishment or the severity of the felony, or if it's a misdemeanor, whatever they may be turn out to be. But when you really start going to court after court case after court case, I feel that there's not enough actually being done. I know we work with actually several judges in the community, and there are some that I'm like, hands down, are just straight advocates for domestic violence. Just the passion that they have when they're on the bench, and you're like, okay, everything's gonna be fair, you know. But then I also feel like there are sometimes a lack, and I don't know if it's just maybe a lack in community resources, and maybe that's why we're not getting that abusers or victims, survivors are not getting that type of help. Because I know one judge in particular, she makes them go to anger management, she makes them do a mental health evaluation. Like she's putting all these right things into place, and unfortunately sometimes we don't do that. Or if you don't have anything else go on in 6 months, we're going to go ahead and just drop that to a misdemeanor C. Well, wait a minute, you just broke the chair on her back, but we're going to drop this to a misdemeanor C because this is your first charge. And it might be just because this was her first time that actually even made a phone call, and so I think there's a lot of things that need to be changed, but obviously that all takes time, especially when you're considering the legal system. It's not something that you're going to snap a finger and then, hey, we're going to be able to do this. But I also think that's where doing outreach and also becoming faces in the court system, they know that when we go to a PFA court, they're expecting one of us.
Right.
There. So, just even now our faces, they're getting to be familiar with it. And I think that helps out a lot. I know we work actually, and I will say this again, we work in a wonderful community that everybody seems to be really supportive of what we do. Again, I know in some places it's kind of taboo, but at least with most of the judges that I've had to work with, they're very reasonable and very open to it. Some judges will just say, we're not going to listen to that. We already have a plan. We know what we're going to do. And other judges will be like, what do you think? What are other court systems doing that you think that you've seen beneficial? And that's where I go back to mental health assessments. Like, I don't understand why we're not working together, because obviously they're 90, 80 something percent of the time there's something else going on, and we're not getting to the root of it. We're just allowing that cycle to continue.
Yeah.
Do I think the legal system
Let's not ask her that question.
has failed survivors? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it's failed men, women, children. I think that domestic violence has kind of become this thing where, these reports are made and these people go up there and, judges get to hear the whole story. And then a decision is made, and a lot of the details don't really matter because it's just another domestic violence case. And I think that when you're an advocate, and I think that when you're passionate and you do get into the details, of course, they can't know every single thing. They have tons of cases and other things going on. But do I feel like at times it's kind of just blown off, and it's kind of just looked at like, oh, here we go, this is another domestic violence case, and we're just gonna say 2 days in jail and that's it, when we know the severity and the dangerous situation. We know that this man probably needs to be away. I think I have been so blown away at times with the don't click on it with the legal system, because what bothers me the most is when it involves children. And I think that's a very heavy thing. I think that I may even get emotional if I have to talk about this, because it just has failed so many children and has put so many children and men and women at risk. Um, but I will say this, something that has helped me and I have learned is that judges have seen a lot of this too, where they believe in a case and we believe in a case and we go up there and we're advocates and we've done the intakes and we've done all that. And then it turns out that victim wasn't serious, or she went and saw him the night before, or he went and saw her the night before, and it kind of feels like, well, all this work that we've put in, which we know that's the cycle, we understand, we're not angry, but at the same time, I'm sure that they've seen a lot of that. I don't know if the legal system like gets a seminar once a year. I just think that maybe we need to be able to talk to some of these judges more, or, kind of, I don't want to say like set a fire, but like kind of, yeah, kind of talk to them and tell them like, no, you might have seen, and I can't think of what the word is. It's not cynical. Is that what I'm trying to think? I don't know what the word is where you just kind of become accustomed to this.
Desensitized.
Yeah, that too. There's another word I'm thinking though, but but that's a good one. Yeah, you just kind of become like, oh, this is routine. This is what
Yeah.
we do. It's circuit civil court. I mean, we're gonna have 10 PFAs, but
But I
yeah,
think that's also where when somebody, if a survivor reaches out to us and they want to go forth with a PFA, we prepare them well enough to be like, okay, this is not just like any other case, because we're more diligent about how we're going to approach things. When it comes to police reports, when it comes to photos, when it comes to their testimony of what transpired in that abuse and why they should be getting that PFA. And I just feel like I think it goes back to education. We don't have people who are educated enough. So when they go in front of the judge, it's just like you're just completely scattered. You have no idea what to say, and you're just like, well, this and this and that. Oh, and he did this or she did this, and it just becomes a battle. And I feel like a lot of times the judge is just like, okay, I need to get to the big picture here, and we have a judge that actually uses that. I want the big picture here, and even though I love him, I think he's wonderful. But and I think that's why we're between Krystal and I and the rest of DVIC, we try to get out that we're here and we have legal advocates, because you can't handle it on your own. If you have no legal experience whatsoever, it is extremely overwhelming. And eventually, even the paperwork alone, I've seen women who are like, oh, just forget it. Just forget it. Because it's so much legal jargon that you can't keep up with.
So speaking of that, Isabelle, so you keep saying PFA. Can you kind of explain what a PFA is and kind of like how, a survivor would obtain one, and how common it is that, you guys work with someone that receives the PFA? Can you kind of talk about the PFA?
Yeah, so PFA is a protection from abuse order. The process is really easy. It sounds really easy, but it's not. You go to the circuit clerk, you petition for the forms, you fill out, you turn it into the clerk, and then you get something in the mail saying you have a PFA court date and you have a hearing, and that's it. But so much goes into just filling out that PFA paperwork that, when I'm going to speak for myself, because I know when I sit down with somebody and we're going over the PFA paperwork, I'm like, we're getting pictures. I need to know what happened. We're getting screenshots of those text messages. We're taking photos. I need everything possible, so that when we submit this PFA, these are our reasonings, and we have a ton of them by this time. And I tend to meet with a client, first to tell me their story, what's happened, what's transpired throughout this time. And then we kind of break it down. All right, the last 6 months, what's happened? The last 3 months, what has happened? And I'm all about documentation. They probably hate me for that. But I'm like, I need you to get a scrap piece of paper, and I want you to write a timeline, because it's really easy for us to remember things. But when you're in front of a judge, it's not that easy. Give me a timeline of these events, because when you're in front of a judge, your opinion is out that window. And a lot of people don't like to think that. I need facts. And what do you have to back up that fact? So I'm very adamant. Like when I meet with a client, we're going for a PFA, we're going for court. I mean, I'll meet with them a week before and then probably the day before preparing, like, this is the way you're going to respond. You know, it's not coaching. You're not coaching anybody. You're just trying to get them to say the words that you know that are there. They just don't know how to present it at that point. So, and within our clients or the population that we currently serve, I feel like most of my clients always win for a PFA, but I'm like, if they did wrong, we're going to make them pay. That's my mentality. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying, if somebody truly was harming you, then they need those repercussions need to come. And I'm not going to back down from something. I don't know if that's a good trade or a bad trade, but also at the same time, sometimes when you catch a victim or now a survivor in that moment, they're like, yeah, let's go forward. But the moment they start hearing from family members, they start getting text messages, you let some days go by, that passion to go forth, you no longer see it. They start now having doubts. Well, how is this going to affect this? How is, and you start hearing. And so when I meet with somebody, I'm very real and I'm very like, what is our end result? Are you just doing this because you're trying to set an example? Are you doing this because, we've just had enough? Because I'm gonna back you in any way that you want me to. But when we go to court, we need to be on the same page. Because the last thing we need is for a surprise to come in and then it's like, wait a minute, what happened? Yeah. And so I'm very adamant about getting those facts, hearing the story, and getting the evidence that we need to go forth and so that we can get this, because sometimes a PFA is not honored. That is the truth. It's not always honored. And if we're involved, we are going to do the utmost that we possibly can to get it. And another good thing about DVIC is actually we have an attorney that works with us and is absolutely free to our victims. He goes to court for them. So, especially sometimes when we deal with clients who are very timid or just they've gone through so much abuse that they're so hurt and broken really at that point that you wouldn't be able to get anything out of them. You know what I mean? And having that attorney is sometimes just that little bit of a push that they needed. And it's actually wonderful to see that when it actually goes out that way and you're able to service somebody that way.
About the protection orders, I just wanted to say that I really have so much respect and commend any victim that files a PFA because there's so much fear that goes into it. There's so many questions, but I have seen women become, women and men, anybody that has filed a protection order, so empowered. And that they are afraid of the abuser. That the last thing that they want to do is stand in a courtroom. I mean, you have a lot of victims dealing with PTSD and mental illness and all kinds of other things. The last thing they want to do is stand in front of a judge directly across from the abuser and say, hey, these are all the things that happened. But I think it's worth it. I think that if somebody decides to file a protection order, the good thing is we do have an attorney, like Isabelle was saying, and you have a lot of support. And once you're in there and you can actually think through the things that you have been through, I think that it's okay. But to get up there is such a challenge. And I have so much respect for victims that decide to follow through with a protection order. That's all I wanted to say.
Well, that kind of... go ahead, Amanda.
So how is a restraining order different from a PFA? Is it the same thing?
No. It's not. It's not. It's so difficult because when you start breaking it down, like I feel like even when you do a PFA and if you're married and have children, you're in a completely different ball game. Like there is just so many things. It's like, so when we hear a story and we're assessing it and it's like, okay, I want to follow with whether it's a PFA, whether it's a restraining order or anything like that, we gather all that information to be like, okay, what is actually going to better serve you, your situation, and if you have kids, because we also need to protect those children. So there's a huge difference on which route we might say, okay, the PFA is not going to work because you have children together. Now, is the state involved? I mean, there's so many categories that you have to take into consideration. So the first thing that we were going to say is PFA, obviously, because a restraining order, I always felt that the restraining order, I felt there was more legal holding to the PFA as opposed to the restraining order, in my view, or just from what I've seen, even in criminal court and things like that. I see the statute of DV much higher than I would a restraining order, if that makes any sense. So again, I'm going for it 100%, and I'm going to get the most that I possibly can out of it. So,
and that's why it's so important that someone that is in a domestic violence situation is able to get in contact with you guys and be able to use you as a resource, because you can help guide them with those questions, because they won't know the answer to those questions, and you can help them with, okay, well, this is probably our best solution for this situation, because everybody's situation is different. And one person's situation may be completely different from someone else. But you guys, as advocates, your number one priority is them. And the police officers do a wonderful job as well, but you guys are more committed to helping them make the right decision for them, for their situation. You're able to look at the whole picture and be able to have the compassion and empathy to show that survivor, instead of them just going in a police officer saying, well, this is, or a lawyer saying, okay, well, this is what you can do. Which one do you want to do? You guys can help them talk through that situation. So you guys are, it's awesome to use you guys as a resource, and that's why it's so important for organizations just like rape counselors to tell, our survivors about you guys, and police officers and everybody, because it takes a village, right, to help everybody, and we have to work together. And I do think because we also serve 4 counties, we serve, Lee, Chambers, Macon, and Tallapoosa, that, we're not just helping Lee County where our buildings are, we're helping outside. And so being able to help each other, it just makes it better for the survivor, because they're getting all the help they need. So
absolutely. I mean, Amanda, you and I have been on cases with the several person, and they just felt even more empowered when we were both in court with them, where they were looking towards the both of us, when they needed us. Yes. So, just us having that relationship also, like you said, it's just so vital.
Yes, and and I think a lot of people, like, oh, well, they have family members or they have someone to help them through it. Just, I think people don't understand is there's some people out there that literally have no support system, and we are their support system. Because most people are like, well, I have a friend, or I have a family member, or I have this, or, some people don't have anybody. And when they do have somebody, they're toxic. They're not helping them in the situation. They're just seeing it one way. Why would you stay with him? Why are you allowing him to treat you that way? Why don't you just leave? Those are like the worst questions you can ask a survivor. They have their reasons, and it may not make sense to somebody, but that's their reason. It may be because they want to be able to eat the next day or have shelter over their head. You may not understand, and no one is going to go for you guys for help until they know about you. And second of all, they do have to be ready. They have to be all ready. And so saying that, how often do you guys see where they come to you and they leave and then they come back and they come back? Do you see that often? Because they have completely made up their mind. I think we see that too. I think Faith and I see that where, well, he was my, boyfriend or my ex-boyfriend, and I don't want him to get in trouble, and they're not quite there, but then they come back because they've had time to think about it. So, our job is to support them, not give them advice, but it is helpful for them to know what options they have, because some people just don't know the options. and they don't have the support to help them. And like you were saying, we've worked with survivors before together, and both of us working together strengthen that individual, just for them to have the motivation to say, I can do this. So it's a big deal.
It is very much so, very much.
All right, so we have one more question for you guys. What final message do you want victims, survivors of domestic violence or sexual assault to know?
I guess for me personally, it's just that there is no judgment. Despite whether you left 5 times and you finally reached your point, or if it's the same sex, or if anything, there is literally no judgment. The moment that you speak to one of us, we're taking you for face value. We are here for you, and we're here to back you 100%. And my biggest thing is, I know personally, is just, I want to see that, because we have so many success stories, and when they move on or they transition to their new life, their new home with their family, and even to the point where they're like, I don't even get to see you every day anymore, and it really does hurt your heart as well, but it's the best thing for them. And I truly, like, those are the moments that I'm like, okay, all of those phone calls, all of that, because it can be stressful, you're just like, this is why I do this. And we want that sincerely for everybody that we speak to. I know I can truly say that, and I think that's what keeps you thriving when you're doing this type of work, because it can be weighing on you, but I just think that's just so beautiful. So I'm really always I'm behind anybody, and I want to see you succeed in that next phase, and you get to that almost, I would say, almost that homostasis where everything's now finally normal. Everything, life is the way it should be. And so I think that's right. And a lot of people think, oh, being in the South, does it really happen to men? All of that goes out the door with us. We just want to be here to help you, or at least I know that is a big thing for me. Oh yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things is, actually, we do have a 1-800 and a local number. So our 1-800 number is 1-800-650-6522. And then our local number is 334-749-1515. And that's a 24-hour number at any time.
So that is the number that they would need to reach out to receive your services.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Okay. For anyone listening, I'm going to actually put those down below in the comment, or like the information box, so that you don't have to worry about writing that down. But all right, do you guys have any final comments, any things you want to say?
No, we appreciate the time that y'all are giving us to actually spread the word, and us working together. I've spoken to you about some stuff, and so I know me and Amanda have spoken. So it's just so great that we actually get to do this. And I thought it was just, when Amanda approached me, I was like, this is such a fantastic idea, and I'm so honored. I know I can speak on behalf of you guys that we're so honored that you did include us. So thank you so much.
Yes, no, thank you guys so much for coming on. We love having our community partners like you guys who we're able to work with, and we both talk about our things.
Yes, and just to let y'all know, that you guys are open 24/7, and you guys are open now even with the COVID-19. COVID-19, has messed up a lot of things, but just to let the community know that, the Domestic Violence Intervention Center is still open to you guys, just like we are. So, yeah.
I do want to say something. I just want to say that if there is a victim that ends up listening to this podcast, I know what it feels like to feel isolated, and I know what it feels like to feel like you have burned bridges and people have cut ties with you, and you've blocked people out of your life, and you may feel very alone in the situation that you're in. But I just want you to know that there is a place, there's tons of places where there will be a group of advocates that will rally around you, and you will find things in those advocates that you probably have not experienced in a very long time. You will have people that will listen to you. You will have people that will advocate on your behalf. You will have people that will believe in you, because a lot of times when we are in those situations, we are told that we're nothing. We're told that, you know, we're never going to have anybody, that that person is all we have. And I just want to encourage you to call the hotline. If you are in that situation and maybe you have your own house and you don't need shelter, but to call the hotline just to talk to someone. Sometimes we have people that just call and say, listen, I'm having a really bad day. I'm in this situation. And they don't necessarily even want any of our services, even though we encourage it, they just want somebody to tell them that it's going to be okay and that there's a way out. And so if you're a listener or if you know somebody that is going through this situation, please reach out. Please call the 334-749-1515 and ask for an advocate. We will go above and beyond to try to speak into your situation as much as we can. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Yeah. So we're going to end it on that because I can't think of a better way to end it. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Okay.